Welcome to the Explainer. So, I want you to picture the global food system for a second. Don't just think of farms and grocery stores, but picture a massive, incredibly intricate economic machine. It's a machine built on a super delicate balance of supply, demand, and hyper-optimized logistics. But right now, well, it's failing its stress tests. We are witnessing cascading systemic shocks across the board, from climate disasters and sudden geopolitical conflicts to sweeping economic instability and totally fractured supply chains. The very foundation of how we feed the world is under unprecedented pressure. Today, we're going to break down exactly why the system is fracturing and what that actually means for global stability. Okay, let's dive into this because you've undoubtedly felt this crisis yourself. Millions of people are currently looking at their checkout receipts and wondering, wait, why is basic sustenance suddenly feeling like a luxury item? We're going to connect the dots between these massive, large-scale macroeconomic vulnerabilities and the immediate real-world pain point of your household budget. Because it's not just a localized issue. It's a symptom of a massive global network under severe strain. So, here is our roadmap. We'll be looking at 1. The economics of food inflation. 2. Climate change and crop yields. 3. Conflict and supply chain shocks. 4. The vulnerabilities of import-reliant nations. And 5. How we're mitigating these risks with agricultural tech. All right, let's start with part 1, the economics of food inflation. You know, food inflation isn't just a single isolated problem. It is a classic textbook case of cost-push inflation. We're looking at multiple simultaneous pressure points acting as severe supply shocks to our interconnected global trade network. Surging transportation expenses and sweeping labor disruptions are directly triggering global food price inflation. Add to that volatile fuel prices, fertilizer shortages, and geopolitical conflict, and well, the economic machine is just getting hit from every possible angle. It's severely constricting supply, all while baseline demand remains highly inelastic. People still gotta eat, right? But what makes these supply shocks so acutely dangerous is the economic gap they create. Specifically, real wage stagnation. Across so many countries right now, we are witnessing a really dramatic divergence between rapid food inflation and consumer purchasing power. Everyday items like cooking oil, bread, meat, and dairy are just surging in cost, while wages are staying completely stagnant. They simply aren't keeping pace. So purchasing power is literally plummeting, which directly and aggressively erodes the standard of living for ordinary families. This brings us to a fundamental economic rule highlighted in our source material. When supply chains are disrupted, prices quickly increase. Modern food systems depend so heavily on global trade. Think about it. The food on your plate has often traveled thousands of kilometers just to get there. Because of this vast spatial distance, any minor disruption in transportation or labor instantly translates into a premium. And guess who pays that premium? You do, right at the supermarket checkout. Moving on to part 2, climate change and crop yields. Let's move to and see how this builds, because it's essentially a chronological domino effect of how climate pressure hits the food market. It starts with an increase in extreme weather, right? Which then drives critical water shortages. Without a reliable water supply, crop yields are inevitably damaged. This reduction in available food creates a persistent and highly dangerous supply and demand imbalance, basically structurally destabilizing the market over the long term. The specific weather factors driving this include severe droughts, massive floods, heat waves, wildfires, and honestly, just completely unpredictable rainfall. Farmers worldwide are facing these severe events with increasing frequency. From a macroeconomic perspective, this creates long-term instability for agricultural crop yields. And why is that such a big deal? Because the global population continues to grow, relentlessly driving up baseline demand for food, while these climate factors continually suppress our capacity to supply it. It is a classic, widening structural deficit. Which brings us to part 3, conflict and supply chain shocks. We have to remember that modern agriculture is absolutely not self-contained. It relies heavily on an uninterrupted flow of international trade. Countries are constantly importing grain, fertilizers, fuel, animal feed, farming equipment, the whole shebang. When wars or regional conflicts erupt, shipping routes suddenly become hazardous, exports just crawl to a halt, and market uncertainty skyrockets. This instantly chokes off the vital inputs that are required to maintain high global crop production. And this brilliantly illustrates the chain reaction. A regional conflict disrupts global energy markets, driving up the cost of natural gas and fuel. Because modern farming is so heavily reliant on fertilizers, which, by the way, are incredibly energy intensive to produce, fertilizer prices just spike. Farming costs surge, and ultimately that financial burden is passed directly to the consumer. It's a perfect, albeit painful, example of how deeply interconnected our global systems really are.
Part 4. Vulnerabilities of import-reliant nations.
While rising prices definitely affect everyone's wallet, developing nations face an absolute existential threat here. Their core vulnerability is a heavy reliance on food imports. When a nation simply doesn't produce enough food domestically to feed its own population, it is completely exposed to and defenseless against these global market price spikes. They basically have to pay whatever the global market demands, or their population goes hungry. There's no buffer. When a population can no longer afford basic necessities, a simple market supply issue rapidly transforms into a catastrophic systemic breakdown. The inability to secure food quickly escalates from widespread hunger, which is a tragic humanitarian crisis, into a complete economic crisis as labor markets fail and capital flight occurs. And that eventually culminates in a full-blown political crisis. History shows us pretty objectively that food shortages act as a massive catalyst for severe societal disruption. They increase social unrest, force mass migration as people desperately search for survival resources, and generate intense public anger that leads straight to political instability. Governments worldwide deeply fear food crises precisely because the lack of everyday survival resources can literally dismantle a functioning society in a matter of weeks. Let's look at some solutions. Part 5, Mitigating Risks with Agricultural Tech. In response to these massive vulnerabilities, markets are actually driving a significant reallocation of capital. We're seeing heavy capex, capital expenditure, just pour into agricultural tech to hedge against this systemic risk. Countries are aggressively investing in advanced water-saving systems, the development of climate-resistant crops, alternative proteins, and heavily controlled environments like vertical farming. The entire goal here is to basically decouple food production from the unpredictability of global weather and fragile supply chains. Now, what's really interesting about this is the role of artificial intelligence. Experts believe AI will drastically transform agricultural predictability, directly mitigating future production risks. By processing massive data sets, AI can revolutionize highly targeted crop monitoring, hyperlocal weather prediction, dynamic irrigation systems, and even optimize food distribution logistics to ensure maximum efficiency. It's really about bringing computational certainty to a historically unpredictable industry, a real game changer. So to bring it all together, this is our core thesis. Food security is absolutely no longer just an agricultural issue. It is a foundational pillar of modern civilization. It connects directly to our overall economic stability, the functioning of energy markets, public health outcomes, and international geopolitics. Governments and economists alike are finally waking up to the reality that a stable food supply is entirely synonymous with national security. So the crucial point is this. We are facing a massive, unprecedented challenge of feeding a growing global population during an era of increasing climate, economic, and geopolitical uncertainty. These pressures are completely reshaping how food is produced, transported, and consumed. Looking at the sheer complexity of the global supply chains we've mapped out today, we really have to ask ourselves, is the world truly prepared for a future food crisis? It's a question that will undoubtedly shape global stability for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the systems that run our world.